Good morning to you. How you doing? Are you well? Are you well? Are you hale and hearty? I tell you what, it's a miserable old Sunday morning here in South Manchester. It's dark, it's grey, it's windy, and a little bit of light drizzle. But sure, what the harm? We're indoors, you and I suppose. It's 11 a.m. I'm live with you right now from South Manchester with Sunday View, live on Fab Radio 2 in Manchester. Tune in radio, trigger warning, .tv, richieallen.co.uk, and plenty of other places as well. Going to look at the Sunday papers, of course, and we'll be hearing some audio, we'll be hearing some interviews from the top Sunday morning television political programmes as well. And you can join in by tweeting at Richie Allen Show. Couldn't be simpler, at Richie Allen Show. And we'll have a chat, you and I. How about that? Welcome to Sunday View. You're very welcome.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Lovely stuff. Giving you the Twitter handle then. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to tweet me. Let me know what you're thinking. Have the papers open as well. Why not? Welcome to Sunday View.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
And I'm not going to mess around. There's loads to get through. So we'll get rid of the theme music there and we'll just crack on. Yeah, I've had a nice weekend so far. It's been nice and relaxing. Hope yours has been as relaxing. Again, thanks for tuning into the show this morning. We are live, of course, when people get it later on. It isn't live between 11 and 12 every Sunday morning. That's Greenwich Mean Time, now that the clocks went back last week. So there you go. Let's jump straight in. There's an awful lot of stuff to talk about. Not sure we'll fit it all in the hour, so we'll jump straight in there. The big story this morning, in terms of the coverage and the attention it is receiving, is the front page of the Sunday Times. The Sunday Times headline today is May's secret Brexit deal. The Times thinks, it alleges, that Teresa May has secured some sort of breakthrough with the European Union and that preparations for a final Brexit deal are actually further down the line than people had previously thought. The Times alleges that it has pieced all of this together because it has spoken with ministers, advisors, civil servants, but also with EU officials. Apparently, some aide or assistant to Michel Barnier has broken cover, and, well, not really broken cover, but has anonymously been speaking with the Sunday Times. So what is this deal then that Teresa May have negotiated with the European Union? Well, under the plans of it, the whole of the UK would remain within a customs union, avoiding the need for physical checks along the border between Northern, that's Northern Ireland, and Ireland. The EU is also said to have offered a significant concession by accepting that the checks on goods can take place in factories and shops rather than at the border. The Times also adds this plan keeps open the prospect of a free trade deal, and that what May is really doing here is she is appealing to Eurosceptics. Downing Street today has said this Sunday Times article is full of speculation and that negotiations are ongoing. Of all the people I've heard talk about it today, Benedict Spence has summed it up pretty well. In fact, he was reviewing this story for Sky News last night because the papers, of course, are available to the broadcast media at around about 10 o'clock each evening. So Benedict Spence is a writer and he reviewed these allegations and he sums it up pretty well. So he sums up what it all means pretty well. Benedict Spence.
Well, we seem to have some sort of agreement, that's what he's suggesting, but that it is a bespoke arrangement whereby the EU will write some sort of special legally binding agreement which will negate the need for their EU-designed backstop to do with Northern Ireland that will encompass the whole of the United Kingdom, and that there will also be an exit clause that will be set in, which will allow us to leave the European Union later on, which is meant to then placate Eurosceptics. So essentially, it's a fudge. You have something in there to try to appeal to both sides, but because there is no real time limit on it, and it is neither in nor out, it is simply a way of prevaricating until further down the line some other sort of arrangement can be agreed to. Now, I'm sure that Mrs. May will feel that this is possibly the best that she can do at this moment in time, and I suspect it probably is. I don't think that it is going to be acceptable by the ERG, as much as Mr. Shipman says that some cabinet members think that it will. We already have David Davis coming out and saying absolutely now what she must do is publish the details of all legal advice that the cabinet has been given with regards to this deal, because in his words, it was the obfuscation of legal issues when it came to Tony Blair and the Iraq War that did for his credibility in his administration, and that if she doesn't do the same, it will undermine her own position. So as you can already see, we don't even know what this secret deal is. We don't know any of the details. We can already see the knives are out and they're being sharpened.
Yeah, David Davis has compared what May might be doing to what Tony Blair did, and has said that May must publish the legal advice that she has received that led her to, if in fact she has agreed this deal with the European Union. I love this ridiculous doublespeak, dear listener. You won't be surprised. Some commentators are actually saying this morning that Teresa May has won concessions from the EU that would keep the UK in the customs union. That's not a concession. It's what the European Union wants. And what is being reported today in the press, in the Sunday Times, would ultimately keep the United Kingdom in the customs union, subject to the freedoms, freedom of movement, of course, obviously being the main one, indefinitely, until somewhere further down the line they can come to some trading arrangement. There's no concession there. It's what the European Union wants, right? Right, I won't bore you to death with this because I'm mindful of how tedious it can become. We'll stay with Brexit just for another few minutes and then we'll move on to more human interest type things. Also, it's been reported today that more than 70 business leaders have signed a letter, again to the Sunday Times, calling for a public vote on the UK's Brexit deal. This is not new news. Some business leaders have been calling for some time now for there to be a public vote on whatever deal Theresa May reaches with the European Union. We know that Vince Cable, Lib Dem leader, well, he wants more. He wants a second referendum. We know that Tony Blair, we know that Mandelson, we know that Anna Soubry, there are many of them. David Miliband, many of them calling for a public vote on whatever deal May reaches with the European Union. So that's not new. But this letter is new. And it is signed by people like the chief executive of Waterstones Bookshop, a former boss of Sainsbury's, and others, saying that a destructive hard Brexit will damage the UK economy. It won't, of course, but never let the truth get in the way of a monstrous lie. This is a business for a people's vote. They're going to launch on Thursday. Sophie Ridge from Sky News spoke to one of these people, a guy called Karan Billamoria. He's known as Lord Billamoria these days. He co-founded Cobra Beer, which is piss water. It really is. Here he is then, Lord Billamoria, on calling for a public vote on whatever deal May reaches.
And it's 2.5 years. The world has changed. And people now know there were false promises made, people were lied to. I think basically people voted for different reasons to leave or to remain. And then this whole thing about a 52-48. Well, there have only been two other referenda, national referenda.
Well, you hear what he says here now. 52% against 48% is not really a victory at all. Whitley explains why.
Referenda, both the results of those in 1975 was 67%, and the one in 2011 was 67%. Conclusive.
Yeah,
conclusive. Oh, what a load of bollocks. So why didn't they, monumental bollocks even, why didn't they say before the referendum then that in order for it to be carried, there had to be a disparity of 5% or 10%? or 6% or 4% or 8%. Well, it was 4%, wasn't it? 8%. Nonsense, isn't it? Say, well, it was only 52.48. Life doesn't work like that. If it was, I don't know, 50.0001%, it was still a victory, wasn't it? Listen to the Sky presenter.
I just want to put to you what some people possibly who voted Leave,
Not possibly, definitely.
who might be watching this morning will think that you're being quite patronising about being lied to and you were sold, you shouldn't have voted, you didn't know what you were voting for. Speak to those Leave voters who will be watching this thinking, head of Cobra Beer, head of Sainsbury's, head of BT, rich men and women who've done very well out of the European Union, telling me that I didn't know what I was voting for.
It's nothing to do with rich young men and women. This is about the country having done really well out of being part of the European Union.
But it hasn't. That's been debunked even by former Remainers, this idea that the country has done incredibly well out of the European Union. It hasn't. The membership of the European Union has led to the basic disappearance of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs all over the country in many different industries. That's what it's led to. It's led to anti-competitive practices. It's led to a semi-skilled, low-skilled migrant workforce taking jobs from the indigenous people of the country. It's not just happened here, it's happened everywhere. This is a fact. The membership of the European Union has done nothing for the country whatsoever. Anyway, a little bit more from this guy Banks. The Sky presenter says to him, if there was a second referendum, and if the people still voted to leave, would you accept it finally?
We have to accept it then, because then you have the facts. Then it was utopia and a dream and all the promises. Now you have the reality. If you still want to leave, fine, we leave. But look at a normal electoral cycle. Normal electoral cycle is 5 years. We're halfway through that electoral cycle. In a normal electoral cycle, somebody wins by one vote, they've won. That's democracy. But in 5 years' time, you can throw them out because you can change your mind, or they haven't delivered, or they haven't performed. This is not democracy. The true democracy would be going back to the people and saying, now do you really want to leave?
That's patently bollocks, isn't it, by the way? And by the way, when do you stop asking then? Do you keep asking again and again and again and again until people eventually say, all right, we'll stay in then? But this patently bollocks nonsense of, well, it's been a couple of years, people have changed their minds. And, we have general elections every 5 years. A referendum about membership of an imperialist bloc like the European Union, a fascist superstate, that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. By the way, this was mentioned 1,000 times in the run-up to the referendum. It was mentioned by Remainers more than anybody else. You can't get this wrong because this is a generational thing. You won't be able to just go back in a couple of years and undo it. The European Union, you can check out any time you like, but you can never leave. It is a fascist superstate. And I know there will be Remainers listening to this programme who will think that it is absurd for me to say that there was no single benefit, there was no single bonus for being members of the European Union. There wasn't, or isn't. There was a lot of perceived benefits for joining, like millions given not only to the United Kingdom, but millions and millions and hundreds of millions given to the Irish and to the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Italians and the Greeks and all of those other countries. Hundreds and hundreds of millions, which created a boom, but a boom built on a house of cards. Because infrastructure was improved, roads were built, and for a few years it all looked like everything was on the up and up. But of course the institutions of the European Union, namely the European Central Bank, has been for the last 10, 12 years, as we know, calling in those debts. And of course the countries don't have the money to pay them back. That was always meant to be the plan. And in lieu of the debt that cannot be serviced, I've said this so many times, I'm boring myself, dear listener. At that point, when the debts can't be serviced, the European Union and the European Central Bank, says, well, I'll tell you what we'll have. We'll have austerity. And in the meantime, you can give us access to your water. You can give us your telecoms. You can give us ownership of your utilities all across your countries. That'll do for us. And that's how it works, the European Union. That's a fact. That's why it must endure, and that's why the United Kingdom can never be allowed to leave. Now, Arron Banks, businessman, has been in the news a lot, and he's on the front page of the Sunday Observer today. He's the co-founder of Leave.EU, and he has been accused of financial malfeasance. He has been accused, effectively, of funneling money to the Leave campaign, pretending that it's coming from his good self, from himself, but actually it's coming from elsewhere. And he's been accused of misleading Parliament over the links between his campaign, the pro-Brexit campaign, and his insurance businesses. So they're saying basically dirty money, or money that didn't originate with Arron Banks himself. Right, so he was on the Andrew Marr show this morning. I'm sure one or two of our listeners have caught this. It was live on BBC One today. Interesting stuff up to a point. Andrew Marr asks him, were you, Arron Banks, the real source of the money provided to Leave.EU? And here's his answer.
Of course I was. The money came from a UK registered company. It was generated from cash, generated from businesses in the UK. And the whole misunderstanding revolves around the role of Rock Holdings as a holding company. Well, before we start, I'd just like to say, absolutely, for the record, there was no Russian money and no interference of any type.
All right, well, let's follow the money, as it were. I just want to be
absolutely clear about that.
So, where did the money come from? When it went into Leave.EU's account, where did the money come from?
The money came from Rock Services, which was a UK limited company. It was generated out of insurance business written in the UK. It's contrary to some of the press reports in the FT and other Remain Leaning publications. We insure nearly 500,000 customers a year, the size of Manchester. We turn over £250 million of premium. It's a sizable business.
Well, I'll come on to that in a moment.
I'm just making clear where it came from.
Just to clear out where it came from. So, Rock Services is what we call a shell company. It doesn't do much of its own, does it?
Well, it's a service company, but it's a UK-based service company.
It doesn't generate that kind of money.
I'm telling you that it came from insurance business written in the UK. So, Rock Holdings is a holding company based in the Isle of Man that owns Rock Services.
So, did any of the money coming into the Leave.EU come from Rock Holdings?
Well, that's where I'm confused with the Electoral Commission referring this to the police. We've not been asked by the Electoral Commission to actually produce our bank statements. I think we have produced them to your show. And what is absolutely clear is it's a holding company, and during 15 and 16 there were no sizable amounts of money went into Rock Holdings. It is not possible for any money to have come from Rock Holdings to Rock Services.
Right, so he's unequivocal there, Arron Banks, about what Rock Holdings is, what it does, and how that money was sent to Leave.EU. He's fairly unequivocal about it. Now, don't think for a minute, just because I believe the UK and every other country in Europe should leave the European Union, that I have any sympathy with or any respect for the likes of Arron Banks. I don't. Nor do I have any sympathy for the tax arrangements that multi-millionaire, billionaire people like him use to avoid paying taxes. Namely, shell companies and holding companies, which are in charge of subsidiary companies. And the holding companies and the shell companies being domiciled in the Isle of Man or in Switzerland or in Gibraltar or wherever. I've no time for any of that. None. I like a level playing field, though. And is Banks dirty? Is Banks shady? I don't know. Is he going to sue me for libel? Probably not. They probably skirt very close to the line, these guys. And they've got very expensive tax lawyers who help them work within the law, bending rules here and there to get away with what they get away with. But it's not just Banks that's doing it. You can be damn sure that the money behind the Remain campaign is managed and moved around in exactly the same way. So I've no sympathy or time for the likes of Arron Banks. I'm not going to demean myself just because I believe we should leave the fascist superstate EU, that I'm supporting the likes of him. I'm not. But there's rank hypocrisy from the BBC asking this guy about shell companies and holding companies, and it's all very murky. Yes, it is all very murky. But the BBC wasn't asking Teresa May and her husband Philip about their relationship with various shell companies and holding companies, and about HSBC laundering money for the Conservative Party under the watch of Teresa May. They're all at it, these people, is what I would say. Here's more from Arron Banks and Andrew Marr, yes, Andrew Marr, of course. Well, he points out that the Electoral Commission doesn't believe you.
Well, the Electoral Commission simply doesn't believe you about that.
Well, then why haven't they asked for the bank statements?
Well,
company they're questioning.
You've given me the bank statements, but it's only a snapshot, and some of it's redacted. It doesn't really prove anything.
Well, you can have the unredacted copy if you want, but it's not fair to put people's bank details there, is it? And
we don't know how many bank accounts Rock Holdings has.
In any event, Andrew, you could keep on going on that line of questioning forever, couldn't you?
Why not? In a sense, Rock Holdings, let's be honest, is an Isle of Man company, which is opaque.
Yeah, I want to put
Why is it opaque?
Well, the Isle of Man Holding Company owns international businesses and it owns businesses in the UK. The Remain campaign got money from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan.
That's irrelevant.
No, it's not irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
He's right to say it's not irrelevant. The Remain campaign was given enormous amounts of money from Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. Is that money clean? Do you think that money is clean?
Relevant to this. This is about what money went into Leave.EU and where it came
it's not
from.
irrelevant because those are foreign-owned entities that own UK subsidiaries.
Yeah, he says these are foreign-owned banks that own UK subsidiaries. And he says that in my case, in the case of Arron Banks, that isn't the case. And they thunder away at one another for another 15 minutes. Marr doesn't really get anywhere. Banks, I could play you more of it, but Banks basically sticks to his guns and says that it's legitimate what he does, the holding companies, owning or managing loads of other companies and all of that. Andrew Marr didn't get anywhere. It'll be interesting to see where this one goes. It really will. The banks are shady, undoubtedly. Is Arron Banks? I'm being asked, how can you say that? I'm actually being asked here. People don't listen to me. I've had an email from somebody asking me, so you don't think Arron Banks is shady? I wonder sometimes do people actually listen to what I say, or do they only hear what they want to hear? I have no time for the exotic tax shelters and arrangements of Arron Banks. Shady, yes. Probably working within the law, though. But I've no time for it. But are you telling me that Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are not? We're taking a break and we're leaving Brexit there. This is Sunday View live right now on Fab Radio 2, TuneIn Radio, triggerwarning.tv, richieallen.co.uk, and download the Cogent Radio app. It's a very clean, very friendly app. It's not taking any of your data or storing any of your details. It's very good, and there's a lot of other good content on there as well. Back with you in 60 seconds.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Right, welcome back to the programme. Thanks for the tweets thus far. Good to be with you. Dean Smith says, Richie, if only Andrew Marr actually asked proper questions like this to actual political criminals. Yeah, I've not got time to get into Teresa May and HSBC and how HSBC awarded a loan of a couple of £100 million to a company that was failing, and how that company then used that money to bankroll the Conservative Party. I'm not going to talk about how, to protect HSBC, George Osborne, when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer in this country, intervened to prevent HSBC from being prosecuted in the United States of America. This particular government, not just this particular UK government, every UK government in history, but let's talk about this one right now, is so bent it is untrue. Filthy. This is a filthy, corrupt government with filthy, corrupt, proven criminals like Teresa May running it. Right? Nicholas Wilson, Mr. Ethical, wonderful guy, genius. He's been on this programme several times talking about his own story as a whistleblower. Nicholas has worked on this with other people. The HSB scandal that the Metropolitan Police in this country, that this country's fraud investigators refuse to get into. It's one of the biggest stories of all time and nobody wants to touch it. The money laundering by the Conservative Party, the crimes of HSBC, and the protection that HSBC has had from this government and the previous coalition government. Of course, Andrew Marr is never going to ask any of these questions when he interviews Teresa May or any of her colleagues. Of course not, because BBC is the establishment mouthpiece more than any other organisation in the world, more than any other news organisation. And of course, the BBC is given several £1 million a year from the European Union as well. It is completely and utterly pro-European Union. Hi to Mwinga. And to everybody else choosing in this morning. Hi to Cocabelle. How you doing, Cocabelle? Nice to hear from you today as well. And to Colin in Dublin. How you doing, Colin? Nice to know you're listening as well. And to Laurent, who's listening to the programme this morning. Now, also on the front page of the Sunday Observer this morning is a gender identity story. Don't groan. We won't dwell too much on it, but it's interesting because Britain has only got one NHS gender identity clinic. Only one. And it has announced it will review its operations because senior staff have been expressing their concerns. Now, this is the Tavistock Centre. I know. I don't have time to get into Tavistock. The Tavistock Centre is looking at this claim that it isn't doing enough to examine the psychological and social reasons behind the desire of some of its patients to change gender. So the Observer says the review has been backed by some parents of transgender children who are worried that young people are being fast-tracked into life-altering decisions. Well, they are. Now, Julie Bindell is a self-styled radical feminist and writer, Labour Party supporter, and a regular contributor to Sky News newspaper review. This is what she had to say about this today.
Gender is something, feminists like myself would argue that is something that you kind of learn as you grow up, and it's sexist stereotypes, so girls like pink.
Gender isn't something you learn as you grow up. Gender is something that is assigned at birth, in my opinion. Anyway.
Boys like playing with trucks, etc. And so there's a huge increase in presentation of young people, in particular girls, to this gender identity clinic. And one of the clinicians has, in fact, written a letter to the trustees saying that they are really concerned about the fact that, for example, there's a 4,000% increase in girls presenting at this clinic saying that they wish to transition to male. Now, the main concern of this clinician is that children under the age of 17 are being fast-tracked by the children's services to adult services. Now, the big implication for this is that if you're a child and you present at these clinics, you might be put on puberty blockers so that puberty is delayed. And we don't yet know the extent of the harm, such as rendering children sterile, etc.
Rendering children sterile, etc. Keep that in mind, because this isn't the claim, or these are not the claims of people whom are anti-trans people, or these aren't the claims of religious people. These are the claims of academics, biologists, who reckon that these puberty delaying or blocking drugs could be making children sterile. Keep that in mind.
Sterile, etc., that these drugs have. But once you're 17 and you are presented at an adult service, then of course you can be placed on cross-sex hormones, which are irreversible.
Okay.
So this is a real concern, and I think it's because of the huge increase that parents and clinicians are saying, whoa, why is this happening? Is this to do with YouTube and a kind of peer pressure and the attraction, particularly for girls, to want to not have all of the kind of, difficulty that being raised girls in this society has?
It's really complicated.
It is indeed.
I love the way they shut it down, the two presenters. I love the way they shut it down. It's really complicated. Let's move on. Yeah, we don't often talk about young girls who want to be boys. It's often, we discuss more often than not boys who want to be girls. But she asks a great question, Julie Bindell, and that is, what is going on? Thousands of girls want to be boys, and thousands of boys want to be girls, and puberty delaying drugs can make them sterile. Where is it coming from? Male sperm count is down all over the world. We talked about this on the show last week. It amused one or two of you. It's becoming more difficult for people to conceive. What's going on? What is going on?
All right, move on. Nothing to see here. Please disperse. Nothing to see here, please.
Please, move on. There's nothing to see here. And that's how the media approaches this, the UK's media. There's nothing to see here. Why now? Why thousands of children? Something must be up. It's one of the great journalistic mindsets. As a journalist, you're supposed to condition yourself as a young journalist to quickly pick up on when something is up. That's pretty much it. What's going on? Why thousands of children? Something must be up. You have to ask that question, because people wanting to transition or to change their sex isn't a new phenomenon. It's been around for decades. And I might say, it's been around for decades, there are no problems. Now, I know that people who wanted to change gender, change sex, maybe 25, 30, 40 years ago will say you're full of shit, Richie. There were many problems with physical violence towards people like that. And of course there were. I'm not an idiot. Spoken to LGBT campaigners like Peter Tatchell, who's been around for donkey's years, about that. There were always idiots, but the point I'm making is it was going on. Why so many now? Why so many now? That's the question, isn't it? And can you ask that question without being labelled as somebody who's a bigot or a transphobe or who hates trans people? Why are thousands of children suddenly expressing confusion about their gender? And why is the answer seemingly so quick to get them on puberty delaying drugs just in case? Madness, isn't it? Yes. You've spoken a lot about that before. I have, so let's just leave that there. Except to say, there is a story in the Sunday Mirror, which I find kind of annoying. And the headline is, £1 million project will teach children it's all right to be publicly gay. Around 70% of 100,000 LGBT people surveyed by the government felt uncomfortable holding hands in public. Why? Why did 70% say they felt uncomfortable holding hands in public? I want to know why. I'm fed up with these newspaper stories that are just headlines and a few almost throwaway lines. Where's the meat on the bones? Did anybody ask any of these people, why do you feel uncomfortable holding hands? Because in my circle of friends and family, I don't know anybody who gives a rat's arse about two men or two women holding hands in public. Couldn't care less, to be honest. But Penny Mordaunt has told the press this weekend that kids will learn to accept same-sex public displays of affection. Is there a problem with children in the UK? Are children running around screaming and pointing at people of same-sex relationships who might be holding hands? The answer is clearly no. But we have to get into schools and teach them to accept what they probably already couldn't give a shit about. This is Penny Mordaunt, the Equalities Minister, and she's announced millions in spending to re-educate the public and re-educate children in terms of their opinions about people who are gay lesbian, bisexual or transgender. We are stepping up work to protect more children and to stop hatred from festering and growing into discrimination in adulthood. Another 1 million will go into healthcare to ensure that LGBT people are treated properly, after half said they had waited too long for mental health treatment. Tough shit, Paddy! The NHS is being ruined. There is no discrimination against LGBT people. If you're waiting months to see a counsellor on the NHS, tough and shit, Paddy. So is everybody else. It's not sexual orientation discrimination. It's the NHS is on its fucking knees. I'm gay and I had to wait months. I couldn't give a shit, pal. I know a guy living across the street, and I really do, who's not well, and he's waited nearly a year to get to see a counsellor. He can't pay for one in the private sector because counsellors charge £70-80 an hour. Oh, but I'm gay, so I should be seen first. Fuck off. No, you shouldn't. Get in the queue with everybody else. Morden said she'll spend a total of £4.5 million on the government's 75 commitments in its LGBT action plan. I haven't seen the LGBT action plan, but I'm terrified of it. Presumably, we're going to have a minimum amount of LGBT people everywhere, serving you in your supermarket, serving you as your MP, working on local councils. We're going to have a minimum of LGBT teachers. Presumably, this is the madness in the 75 commitment LGBT action plan. Everyone should feel safe and happy, says Mordaunt, to be who they are, to love who they love, and to live their lives without judgment or fear. It's pretty much the way it is now. 24 minutes to the top of the hour. 23 minutes to the top of the hour. Children will learn to accept same-sex public displays of affection. They'll be taught about it in schools. Something which children couldn't give a shite about. And something which children shouldn't be asked to confront. Leave children alone. Let their parents answer any questions the children might have. Why are those two guys over there holding hands, Daddy? Because they're together. All right. Why are they together? Well, they obviously love one another. They're together. And they're holding hands. It's all right, isn't it? Yeah, it is, Daddy. That's how it goes. Anyway, let's move on. Tweet at Richie Allen Show. The Mail on Sunday, front page. I won't dwell on this because I've already talked about the criminal mastermind that is Teresa May. Although she's not that intelligent, it's just that nobody exposes her, except for people like Nicholas Wilson. The Mail on Sunday says Teresa May has complained to the BBC over its coverage of last week's budget. Teresa May is pissed off because the BBC used a think tank called the Resolution Foundation to attack Philip Hammond's budget. And the government and Teresa May is annoyed because the director of the think tank used to work for Labour leader Ed Miliband. So Teresa May is alleging bias on behalf of the BBC. You could choke on the irony. We'll leave that one there. That's the front page of the Sunday Mail. The Sunday Telegraph. Give staff free fruit. Minister tells bosses. Wow. Your boss, dear listener, should offer you perks like free fruit, bicycle loans and counselling. That's coming from the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. He's launching this plan tomorrow, Monday, to keep workers healthy. And he says that if your boss gives you free fruit, bicycle loans and counselling, it'll relieve pressure and that there won't be so many queues for NHS appointments. And he gave an interview to the Sunday Telegraph today, Hancock said, and he said employers need to be more engaged when people aren't well. In the dystopian future, folks, you will get free fruit from your boss, grown by Monsanto. Why not? You'll get a loan of a bicycle, and on the handlebars of the bicycle, The sweat on your palms will be tested for everything. Your pulse will be checked. Your blood pressure will be checked. And they'll give you counselling. And everything you say in your counselling session, every fear that you express, every opinion that you express will be taken down and used against you in the future. Lovely headline. Sounds so benign. Give staff free fruit. Why not? Yeah, until you find out where the fruit's coming from. The Sunday Mirror. Grenfell sex scandal. More than a year now since the dreadful Grenfell Tower and a terrible loss of life. Will they ever get to the bottom of what really happened? No, of course they won't. According to the Sunday Mirror, a support worker who was sent to the area to help the survivors readjust and help them with their problems, and God knows, I mean, their problems must be numerous. Apparently one of these support workers had an affair with one of the mourners who lost friends in the tragedy, and Emma Dent Code, who's the MP for Kensington, said she was horrified. The Star on Sunday, not a nice story on the Star on Sunday for dog lovers. 1,000 hero dogs killed by army. So the Sunday Star is reporting that 1,000 military service dogs, many of whom have been in Afghanistan and Iraq, have been basically destroyed by the army. Not because they're sick or injured, but because they have no use. Retired military dogs have been in the news before, back in December last year. There was an online petition and a campaign was launched which saved 2 ex-service dogs facing being killed. Are people really surprised that the army murder 1,000 dogs? Dogs that have no physical problems? How can you be surprised by that and express outrage at that? The army have killed millions of people in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya, and now in Yemen, of course, and everywhere else in our lifetime. They couldn't give a shit about dogs, right? Right. Time for a break. And when we come back, we're going to have a very interesting debate, or hear from an interesting debate about how Europe is lurching to the right and about immigration. Very interesting stuff on the Mar Show earlier. This is your Richie Allen Show, Sunday View, back in exactly 90 seconds with plenty more. Keep those tweets coming in. I will read from them as soon as I come back.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever. Forever.
Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show. The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Welcome back. Somebody calling themselves Orgone Box on Twitter. Good morning to you, whoever you are. Thanks for listening to the programme, by the way. Has tweeted me to say, you are bang wrong on that, Richie. Let me just get this right. Sexuality is assigned at birth. Gender is a social construct. I am on your side, but get the language right, dude.
What kind of fuckery is this?
It's proper fuckery. When you were born with a penis or a vagina. If you were born with a penis, you are a boy. If you were born with a vagina, you are a girl. End of story. Coca Bell is wiping a week's worth of bacon grease off the stove listening to the Richie Allen Show. I make the most mundane and annoying tasks bearable. Or maybe I don't. Maybe I make them even more annoying. Hi to Cartoon Drunk then, and to David Stanford, who talks about blockers. We can see where that's meant to go. That's puberty blockers. Mandatory, just be sure. Then never have any natural swords ever. I think I might have walked in on a conversation there. Keep the tweets coming in. How about giving out free chocolate, says Feathers Are Us. That would help my well-being. Yeah, indeed. At Richie Allen Show on Twitter, by the way. You can email richie at richieallen.co.uk, but the emails don't always get to me. Now, moving on. Very interesting debate on the BBC sofa this AM. Andrew Marr had 3 women on to review the papers. They were Tracy Brabin, who's a Labour MP. You might remember she got Joe Cox's seat, Batley and Spen, and the broadcaster Julia Hartley-Brewer. And also, completing the trio, was Leslie Vinjamuri. She works at Chatham House. They were talking about the rise of the far right in Europe and that racism is on the rise and immigration and immigrants are being blamed. And they talked about Angela Merkel's departure. She won't be standing for election again. It's very interesting. Have a listen to it and we'll have a little bit of a chat about it when we come back. This on the Andrew Marr Show earlier.
We'll be talking about Angela Merkel later on, Tracy, but she is somebody who was really the dominant figure across Europe, a colossus, and then she made a political mistake in allowing 1 million people into Germany, and things turned against her very, very fast. The left and the right moved up, and the centre began to implode, and Europe looks a lot different as a result. And you could even argue that Brexit had something of the same dynamics behind it too.
I mean, certainly, this is in the Observer, it's their focus piece. Brexit is just a sideshow of EU mired in crisis. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. When Barack Obama did his final trip, I mean, Angela Merkel was his final visit, and they obviously had a fantastic relationship. She's been a very phenomenal politician, but there are other issues to be looked at across Europe, which is, the standard of living for young people, and this has meant that there has been the rise in the far right, these swaggering men who are talking quite polarised language, but you can't get away from the fact that Orban is basically a fascist, and it is deeply worrying for Europe.
I mean, I would argue that the likes of Angela Merkel, that you just handed that to them by that catastrophic mistake to open the borders. No one, as with mass immigration to this country from Eastern Europe under Tony Blair's government, no one bothered to ask the people. And it's funny enough, people like to have a say in how their country is run and who lives in it. And they will punish the politicians who don't let them have a say. And that's simply what we're seeing. This is actually, again, whether you like the people who are being voted for or not, we shouldn't be criticising democratic choices. A lot of the political elite do this an awful lot of the time. If you believe that every person, every man, every woman should have a vote, let them have their vote and trust that they make the right decisions.
But it is deeply troubling. These sinister forces are rising.
No, I think deeply troubling is to just invite 1 million people into the country without asking permission. I think that's more deeply troubling.
Good stuff from Julia Hartley-Brewer there. And it goes right to the heart of this debate about immigration and the claims that people whom are anti-immigration, well, they must be racist. Their anti-immigration sentiment is born out of a fear of a dislike of people from other parts of the world or from other ethnic backgrounds. And of course there are people who fear people from other ethnic backgrounds, and there are people who despise and dislike people from other ethnic backgrounds. That's true. There's no doubt about it. But there are people who fear what will happen to them and to their quality of life when immigration is not controlled and jobs then are not as plentiful and access to public services becomes more difficult. That isn't racism. That's what Hartley-Brewer is getting at. And we have on this programme, but the world's press has not talked enough about the reasoning behind Merkel allowing 1 million migrants to come into Germany in that space of time, that period of time. Knowing full well, you can't make the argument that it was a bad policy. You can't, well, you can, but just listen to me for a minute. You can't make the argument that the nightmare that has unfolded in Germany is just as a result of bad policy. No, these people are not stupid. They knew what would happen when they did what they did. They knew that it would anger people, that it would stir people up, that it would ultimately result in a lurch to the right, as it were, in terms of people's politics and people's preferences. They know all this. Some great friends of mine over the years, people who've been on this programme and will come on this programme again, who've still got one foot in mainstream, they still believe that these are bad policies, that this is just foolishness. This is just a stupid policy by a stupid politician. No, it isn't. It's completely planned meticulously. It's exactly what they want. Good stuff on the BBC this morning. Good stuff from Brewer.
I mean, I think that's more deeply troubling.
The problem, of course, is that the information is being skewed. So it's very difficult for people to make a choice about immigration when they're being told immigrants cause crime, immigrants don't turn up to...
Yes, they are being told that in the left-wing press. Of course they're being told, of course they are being told in the right-wing press that immigrants are criminals, crimes, terrible, all that. That's what they're being told. But in the left-wing press, they're being told that we're a multicultural society. We are multicultural. We have to let migrants in. There's no problems whatsoever. Of course, on the right side of things, the right-hand side of things, you're getting, they're all murderers and rapists, which they're not. And on the left, you're being told it's all hunky-dory, it's all fine and dandy, when it isn't. It's only in the independent media, and there's very little of that. Because most of the so-called alternative media is just mainstream light. It's not really alternative. Massive problems with mass immigration in this country. Massive problems it's led to. Driving down wages, driving down working conditions, impoverishing people because a low-skilled, low-wage workforce coming into the country from Eastern Europe, competing for jobs with semi-skilled or low-skilled people in this country, and nothing put in place to protect the people of this country from unscrupulous bosses and companies who loved it when the migrant workforce came in and said, marvellous, these people will work for sod all. We will abuse that. That's what happens. And it's always identity politics on the BBC. You have the lefties. Oh, they're blaming the migrants for everything. And then you have those on the right who are just as bad. It's crazy, is what it is. It's mad. Right, 6.5 minutes past the hour, to the top of the hour. On the gender thing, I'm well aware of the dictionary definition of the word gender, and that the dictionary definition differentiates between cultural differences between males and females as opposed to medical or biological. I'm well aware of it. I just don't go along with it. I take a different interpretation of the word gender. You know, people will say, as Orgone Box is saying on Twitter, that whether you're a male or female, that's your sex. Yes, fair enough. But your gender. You're often asked gender. You're often asked gender on a form. You're not asked sex. If you fill in a form for, I don't know, for a survey, they're not supposed to ask you these days when you apply for jobs, but they will give you a choice of gender, M or F. So it's semantics, this. It's semantics, is what it is. You're born with a penis, you're a boy. You're born with a vagina, you're a girl. It's the way it always was. So this gender constructive crap, I don't buy into any of that. That's my personal choice, by the way. 6.5 minutes to the top of the hour. I was going to talk about a Tory MP called Kemi Badenoch, who grew up in Nigeria. She was on Sky News today. We might just have time for it. Yeah, there was a Tory MP who grew up in Nigeria, interesting woman called Kemi Badenoch. I think it's pronounced Badenoch, Badenoch or Badenoch, Kemi. Anyway, she grew up in Nigeria. She was on Sky today and she talked about quite a few things. But one of the things she talked about was women's reluctance to get into mainstream politics. And it was very interesting what she had to say about abuse. Listen up, this is kind of refreshing. Young Tory, I know, MP, they're all the same, doesn't matter, Labour Tory, Kemi Badenoch, and she's talking here about women's reluctance to get involved in politics and she talks about abuse, and I think she's good.
But the real issue we have is women not wanting to come forward because they're worried about personal abuse. They don't like the toxic atmosphere of politics at the moment. There are so many barriers that women have in terms of coming forward, and a lot of it is actually the way that we approach these types of jobs. We like to think that we must be qualified or overqualified before we go for them. Men don't, and if you look at how long it takes, it typically takes a woman about 2 years to make the decision to do it. With the men, I say it's about 48 hours to a week.
That's it. I didn't know that. Now, she's looked into that. It's interesting. Women take a lot longer to make the move towards public life because women assume that they need to be qualified in some way and they need to prepare themselves, to cover themselves in terms of knowing what's going on and, maybe political courses or whatever. But men just go, I want to get into it, so I'll just get into it. That's I didn't consider that. Don't know if it's true, I just find it interesting. But this next bit is really interesting.
And that alone is responsible for there being so many more men than women coming forward.
Do you think women have a harder time on social media then? You were talking about the abuse earlier.
I think they tend to attract more attention simply because there are not as many women in politics. It's the same if you're an ethnic minority as well. So I have loads of followers, for instance. I have no idea who they are, where they come from. They're not necessarily constituents. And then if you represent a party that's in government, people have a lot more to be angry about.
So you're saying you're getting that kind of abuse, racist, perhaps sexist abuse on social media?
I don't, to be honest, Sophie, I actually don't check my Twitter unless it's someone I follow. I don't see the messages, so I don't feel that way. But I know a lot of other MPs do, and quite a few have come off it as well.
Probably quite sensible.
Probably quite sensible. What an answer. It's wonderful. Ignore it. This is a black MP from Nigeria originally, and she's a Tory, and is not getting dragged into talk about abuse on Twitter. There's probably racist abuse on there. There's probably stuff like that. I just ignore it. Or I only pay attention to the things being said by the people I follow. Wow. That shouldn't be so revolutionary, of course, in a time when they want to clamp down on freedom of speech and delete people and remove them because they have allegedly offended somebody. Kemi Badenoch there just saying, just ignore it. Doesn't matter ultimately, does it? 3.5 minutes then to the top of the hour. That's it for Sunday View. Good to be with you today, as always. The Richie Allen Show tomorrow, live, of course, at 5 p.m. UK time, Monday. And be beavering away on that today. Can't tell you much about who's coming on the show in the coming week, but I'll have terrific guests for you, no doubt, throughout the week. The show can be heard, of course, live every day on Fab Radio here in Manchester, Fab Radio 2, richieallen.co.uk, triggerwarning.tv, Cogent Radio, and many other places actually stream the programme without even telling me. I find new places who are streaming it on a daily basis. It doesn't bother me. So that's good. Right, enjoy your Sunday. And I'll just speak to you tomorrow. I suppose there's nothing left to say, really. Other than look after yourselves and one another. We'll do it all again tomorrow at 5. Alrighty.